What's up, fight fans? It's Big Tone MMA and Nolan King, aka MMA Kings. What's up, man?
How's it going, man? I'm pretty doing pretty well. First Contender series episode in the books, and I'm just raring to get into it. So let's do this thing, huh?
Yeah. First of what a debut, a second season debut for the Contender series. Of course, the third season will be on ESPN Plus, but for right now, you do need a UFC Fight Pass subscription. I guess there is a promo out there. If I don't know why we're promoting this, but
Do you work for UFC Fight Pass?
I mean, my hat says UFC, but I do not work for UFC Fight Pass. You can get 8 weeks for $14.99, which is $5 off the normal price.
Yeah, pretty good.
So we had some crazy action on this one. The first fight, a little bit weird. Kevin Holland was facing off against Will Santiago. Kevin Holland was the biggest favorite on the card, actually. Santiago is, if I'm not mistaken, usually a welterweight, and he's undersized for that weight class.
Yes, sir. You're spot on.
He looked incredibly tiny next to Kevin Holland, who looks like a huge man. And yeah, the fight played out. It went to a decision. Kevin Holland basically showboated his way all the way to the end. And it was, I mean, he was brutally honest with the Laura Senko. He said he didn't think his performance was good enough for a contract, but he hopes to get back on the show in a couple weeks or 4 weeks, I guess. What were you expecting? And I mean, what did you think of Holland's performance?
Yeah, I mean, going into it, I thought it was a bit of it was one of those fights that looking at it on paper, you knew who the UFC wanted to win. Will Santiago's a tough guy. We saw it tonight. He has very heavy hands. It's the one thing that when you think of him, you should be aware of. That's the power to put you down on the ground on your back. Moving up to 185 pounds as a very undersized 5'7" welterweight is not necessarily a good idea, especially when the guy that they're giving you is the number one ranked middleweight in Texas and in California, which are two of the biggest regional scenes, most deep regional scenes in the United States. So clearly the UFC, in my opinion, this was, if you looked at the whole Contender series, the 8 weeks, all the matchups we know, this was one of the ones I thought was one of the worst examples of the matchmaking. I think they've done a relatively good job with the rest of it, but this was one of a handful of examples I thought was kind of not a matchup that you would want if you wanted it to be competitive. Now, with that being said, watching the fight, it wasn't that, there wasn't that much of a gap if you were scoring it. Holland won the first and second rounds, in my opinion, solidly, not dominantly, not decisively, just, enough. He did enough in both those rounds where nobody could argue that he lost. Third round, was a toss-up, really. Santiago had him hurt. Holland just continued to showboat, even though he wasn't being that effective. I think Dana White, there's a big difference between the Mike Jackson showboating style, where you're not necessarily putting on an output, you're just getting distracted from your fight by doing things. And then which is what Kevin Holland was doing. And then there's like the Sean O'Malley's or, for Bellator, MVP, where these guys integrate flash into their style while they're being effective, which it's totally different. I just think Kevin Holland, it was a big distraction on everybody's part. It was a big distraction on his part. It was a distraction for Dana. It was a distraction as a fan watching. I just felt kind of frustrated watching because I've watched a lot of regional tape on him, and he's a lot better of a fighter than that. And props to Santiago for being the guy in the situation that took it a little bit more seriously and tried to really give it his all. Even though he was a 10-1 underdog or whatever he was going into the fight, but like you said, Holland was pretty honest afterwards, and it will be interesting to see where he goes from here, maybe an LFA or somewhere like that, go back to that scene. But I think he's got promise because when he was focusing, he did look good, and hopefully he'll learn from this and not try to put the sideshow in his fights when he's not in a position to be doing that.
Yeah, he definitely has that, style that Dana White's looking for, the flashy style. It sounded like his background was in Kung Fu, actually, which is not common for MMA whatsoever. And so we saw a lot of that kind of, flashy spinning shit, if you want to call it that. I feel like Will Santiago kind of came out of this almost a winner. Like I saw the reaction on social media was, Will Santiago's, took this fight at 185 and really came to fight, and was giving it all his all, and facing a much bigger guy, kind of held his own. So props to him as well.
Big time. The stock, if you're going stock up, stock down, I think, Holland's either stayed neutral or went down a little bit, and I think Santiago's rose. So props to him. It takes two to tango, and gotta give him some credit for hanging in there and proving some people wrong about his abilities.
And then the weirdness kind of continued because we had Montel Jackson fighting. You want to say the last name?
Yeah, Rico Disculo.
Disculo?
Disculo, yeah.
Is that Italian?
It is. I thought you were supposed to be the aficionado in that category.
But I didn't want to mess. I was going to say Disculio. I don't know.
I believe it's Disculo, but he's from a couple towns over from me, and yeah, that was a weird fight. There was some it's about every foul in the book was thrown in that one, and the double point deduction, the rare double point deduction. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff going on. But I thought Jackson looked awesome. I don't know what you thought, but he was, he didn't get signed, and I think that might have been a good call just because I think a couple more. Imagine one or two fights down the road where he has time to improve. I think it will do him wonders. He's only been competing in pro MMA for less than his first pro fight was less than a year ago from today. So 6-0, going 6-0 in calendar time, 25 years old, bantamweight. I think the sky's the limit for him, and I'm glad that they took this step to maybe not make the impulse decision to sign him now versus giving him a couple extra fights to improve first, because I think they're going to get a better outcome out of that.
Yeah, honestly, when the show was over, I didn't even include him in my top 3 to get signed. Even though he did get the finish, it just he looks very green. Props to him though for staying composed after 2 point deductions and making sure he got that finish, because there could have been God knows what would have happened on the scorecards. With the 2 points deducted, could have been some weirdness going on there. I thought he stayed composed and didn't let the two of the fouls were probably inadvertent. The elbow to the back of the head was pretty blatant.
Yeah,
but 2 of them were like, what are you going to do about that?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there. I kind of looked at the fouls as being blatant, not in the sense of he was being completely like intentional or he did it to hurt Disculo or be dirty, but blatant in the terms of blatantly obvious. They were just so flagrant. In terms of that's like you said, that first elbow was brutal. That I think Herb Dean did a good job with that. That first one I think was an automatic point deduction. That could have impacted the fight severely. Maybe it did impact the fight somewhat. I mean, Disculo was getting pieced up, but who knows? Maybe it rattled him. Maybe it rang his bell even more. And then the second foul, Herb gave him the stern warnings to don't do it again. You got to control, your weapons. And then the third time he took the point. So I like there to be some control, at least some consistency where, I'd rather have a referee be strict and, be a little bit less lenient with fouls and more lean towards taking points away more than be one of these wishy-wash refs that gives 12 warnings before they take a point away. So definitely some weirdness in Contender Series tonight. And one more thing I just want to point out about this fight too is I thought Jackson, for a guy that was on the trajectory to become an Olympic wrestler, his striking was awesome. I mean, like the fight hit the mat a couple times, but most of it was just outboxing Disculo.
Yeah, I like how he basically used the second round to showcase the wrestling, and then the rest of the fight showed off, the striking side. That was cool to see. The stoppages were definitely. I mean, as far as Herb Dean, being consistent with the fouls, he was also very inconsistent with the stoppages.
I agree.
So we saw some weird stuff tonight. Anyway. let's get to what is basically the main event. Honestly, let's be real. Greg Hardy, Austin Lane, two former NFL players right here. Big time athletes, big boys. We knew coming into this fight, someone was getting knocked out. Someone was getting a UFC contract, whether it was Greg Hardy or Austin Lane. Honestly, I was surprised the bookmakers couldn't decide. They had him as a pick'em fight. And that kind of, thinking about it, you got two gigantic athletic guys who are going to stand and bang. That's about as close as 50-50 as you're going to get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the heavyweight division, back when I used to do a little bit more betting and stuff, like I would just almost stay away from heavyweight fights in general, just because they're so crazy. How many times with the more notable heavyweights have these guys had just roller coaster careers where, they get knocked out 4 times in a row and then they're on their last straw and then they win all these fights. We've seen resurgences and all this weird, wacky stuff. So especially at the regional level, man, like, it's tough to be able to even, mull it around in your head, especially when Hardy hadn't fought a pro fight. Austin Lane had 4 fights, but, the talent level that he was fighting, was good, but not, there's really no
Was it?
great regional. I mean, it was good. I mean, he was fighting down in South Carolina. I think he fought for.
I think he fought a 2 debuting guys, a 6-13 guy,
Yeah.
and 1 good guy.
Right. What I'm trying to go off of more is the fact that, some of these with the regional heavyweights, I think a lot of it too is experience. Like if you look at cards, there's a lot of like 0-1 versus 6-0, things like that. And I'm sure he might have had a couple softballs. I know that the last guy that he just beat was undefeated. I don't think he was a little older. He was kind of a
40
muscle
something.
freak kind of guy. But it wasn't my point is it wasn't he was beating, I see some of these promotions out near you. I think there's I forget what one of those
Whoa.
I'm taking shots at you. What's the name of it? Jonathan Wilson came out of there. It's like notable. It had like used to have women heavyweights and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember, but anyways,
California, land of that.
Yeah. I think like compared to Hardy's competition, like Lane was fighting pros, Hardy was fighting amateurs.
That was always weird to me. I don't know if it was weird to you. It was like his athletic ability was just so high. And you can always find other debuting pro fighters to fight. Why fight amateur?
Right.
Unless it was like, kind of like a keep them in bubble wrap type of thing.
Yeah. I know some states make you take a certain amount of amateur fights before you turn pro, which I don't know if that would, I don't think Texas is one of them because
Texas doesn't have rules like that.
No. They only have rules for marijuana. They don't have rules.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's just, obviously I actually picked Lane in this fight, so I can't even like pull the told you so really that hard. But, since I've had the pleasure of watching him in all of his amateur fights and, it's just been crazy to see that type of athleticism in the cage, even at the amateur level. Like I don't remember any level where I've seen a guy just physically chase down another 240-pound man and just make him literally run in a circle around the cage and take him out. So yeah, I mean, he's a specimen. I know that the out of the cage stuff and the past, trials, tribulations and everything else has bothered people. It's completely understandable. But at the same time, he was on the show and, the point of the show is if you put on an impressive performance, you're going to get a UFC contract. So I don't think I saw some people like acting like tonight they were not surprised, but like, shocked that Greg Hardy got a UFC contract. And it was like, this is what the UFC was shooting for by even putting him on the show. So I don't necessarily understand the second line of outrage. Like, wow, I can't believe that the UFC signed him.
And the other thing is they didn't give him a layup.
What's that? No.
The Austin Lane, I mean, who was he? He was originally scheduled to fight
Brandon Sales, who was from
who's also very tough,
6-1 or something. Yeah, I mean, these guys would have earned their shot on the Contender Series anyways, regardless of Greg Hardy.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like they were giving. If they wanted to, they could have matched him up like they matched up Kevin Holland.
Right,
they didn't do that.
The bookmakers even, when the odds first broke, I believe Hardy was like a +1
underdog.
So
Yeah. So totally, like this is this was not the UFC just like, let's funnel Greg Hardy into the system.
Right.
We won't get into the off the field stuff, but he's on the show. There's literally nothing we can do as
Right.
a news, as even as journalists, to stop this,
Right.
from happening. Like, we're not
Yeah.
going to have a petition, and Dana White wouldn't care if we did.
Right.
And,
Yeah. I mean,
it
Dana
is
won't
what
even
it is.
Dana won't change the weigh-ins. All the fighters are petitioning for that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we necessarily, I see some people like, oh, by watching this, you're, enabling it. And like, for me, like, I just don't necessarily agree with that. Like, if, on the reverse end of that, like, if it really does bother you, like, your way of sticking up would be to not watch it. But I also think, for us as journalists, we have to cover the sport. Like,
Definitely.
for us to
And this is a
omit
big story.
information, right? For us to omit information that's out there, or results in a sporting event or something, like, I can't see us, having to do that. I'm going to take it for what it is. We all know what happened, and we all can have our opinions, but at the same time, this guy's doing, it doesn't take away from this man's skills or what he's presenting in the cage.
And I mean, the fight was insane.
Right.
It only
He just goes
lasted.
at people.
Yeah, it was only lasted 57 seconds. They basically just ran at each other. Large punches were exchanged on. But I thought Austin Lane threw some big bombs too. None of them really connected like Greg Hardy's. But man, once that once that overhand right caught him, and then he kind of it almost sat him down. He was a little bit wobbled, and then the left. I mean, he was out cold.
Yeah.
That was vicious, dude.
I'd have to go back and watch Lane's older fights again, but I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and I can't remember him being like hurt before like that. And I think a lot of times with fighters, when you see them hurt like that for the first time, like the knockouts end up being way worse. Like, he got hit, he went down, and then he just turned away. Just left himself completely open, and that was just
yeah, no,
gruesome. Like they don't know how
first,
to. It's almost like a learned ability to defend yourself when you're hurt. You know what I mean? So if
yeah.
you've
I
never
don't
been
think
rocked in a fight,
he's probably never been punched like that in his
no,
life.
right?
And I mean, just before we move on, well, there's a couple more points. One, I want to ask you, who, it sounded like Greg Hardy's actually going to be part of a developmental program, is what Dana White was hinting at. So what that means to me, at least in my opinion, is that he will probably have another fight in LFA as a pro. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. It's kind of tough to tell. Somebody threw out on Twitter, I think this idea is like not crazy from what Dana said either, would be to put him on the Ultimate Fighter. The heavyweight season
Because they're
coming
doing
up
heavyweights.
would probably boost the ratings quite a bit. I know people would probably tune in for that one. So that's a possibility. Pull like a Kimbo Slice type thing, bring him in as the 16th entrant or whatever you want to call it. And so that's a possibility. Or just, like Bevan Lewis did, where he just kind of went along and they were like, yep, you can fight for LFA. And if you win, you continue on with us, through our program. I honestly don't know what would have happened if Lewis lost one of these upcoming fights. My understanding is he would have lost his Contender Series opportunity, but I don't know if it would have been that he would have lost his UFC developmental thing too. But it's going to be something along those lines. I don't necessarily think that the next time we see Greg Hardy, it's going to be in the UFC octagon, like the real one.
Yeah, I mean, my money is that he's on a LFA card as a pro sometime soon. It's what they do with Andre Lee. It's what they do with Mackenzie Dern.
Yep, Yair, I believe.
Yair, like it's just Dana was very vague, but from the tidbits that we did get, that's kind of the gist that I was getting.
Right.
But let's say he was on the UFC roster. Who is more naturally athletic than him?
No one. I mean, you'd have to go pretty far up the rankings to find somebody that was, close or could compete in that category. But, the guys that he's going to be giving off the bat, say he was on the UFC roster right now and they were picking from, he's a 1-0 fighter or, has a couple fights under his belt and he's coming in. Who do we give him? Just treating him like everybody else. Like there's nobody in that, bottom half of the UFC division that even comes relatively close to it.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the UFC as a whole, like Yoel Romero, but he's older, former gold gold medalist wrestler. Be up there in athleticism,
Yeah.
and John Jones, very athletic, but
Yeah.
uh, I mean, to be star defensive end,
Right.
there's not. The
Yeah.
UFC doesn't get people like that.
Right. Especially
Uh,
where he's, arguably in his athletic prime too. Usually with MMA we get guys when they're in their 40s or something, ex
yeah,
NFL players, but
or even like practice squad NFL guys tend to do
right, like
well.
Brendan Schaub and Mitrione and those guys.
Yeah, yeah, those guys killed it, and they're
Yeah.
like half the player that Greg
Right.
Hardy was.
Yeah, I mean Mitrione's a great example. Like we think of him as being a pretty athletic heavyweight, and then you compare him to Greg Hardy and see
Whoop,
the difference in the athleticism
match them
there.
up right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Throw him in the Bellator Grand Prix, right?
Yeah, right. So we'll move on.
Sure.
Spend a good amount of time on that one, but that was honestly the big talking point on this anyway, so that's
Yeah.
fine. I know there's some strong feelings about this next fight. Chris Curtis, Sean Lally,
Lally. Yep.
Lally, at 170. Um, Another one that ended in the third round. I thought Chris Curtis kind of showed, that all-around game, UFC ready. Whereas Montel Jackson, looked green. Chris Curtis looked very much the veteran. Like someone who could just jump right in the UFC and be successful. And the KO was a little weird. It looked like he went for a side kick, and somehow it turned into like a spinning hook kick.
Yeah. Yeah, he said something about it in the interview afterwards. He was kind of saying, I went to throw, I think he said, I went to throw a side kick and then he moved. So I kind of tried to adjust halfway through and it came in to be more of a hook kick. So, yeah, man, that was pretty fantastic. And, just a little backstory on both these guys. They're both in my area and I've seen them fight before. And, the CES is the big fish, the big pool down here, the big, whatever you want to call it. And Cage Titans is more of a Massachusetts-based promotion. Most of their fighters are from Massachusetts. And they have some good fighters. Manny Bermudez, who's in the UFC now. Joe Giannetti, who is on The Ultimate Fighter now. And now Lally on the Contender series. And, Lally was fighting at 185 just because he never really wanted to make that cut down to 170 unless it was for a big fight. So they had some talks about bringing Lally to CES, have a kind of a champions fight type of thing. And but the level of competition that Curtis had beaten and just the number of fights in a row he had won was so different than Lally. And, honestly, I again, we talked about this with Will Santiago earlier. I think that having seen them both fight, Lally and Curtis, and seeing what they're capable of before this fight, I think Sean Lally's stock went way up for me too, because I was expecting Curtis to be on a completely different planet than him. And Lally hung in there. The third round, he really tried to go for it. Toughest fight of his career by far. And I think that, he showed that he is tough and he's not, going to get blown out of the water. If he took a step to like an LFA or CES or something, he could still compete there. So I think that was good. And yeah, man, that kick was wild. I think that should have earned him the contract. We'll get more into the contracts later, but that was pretty fantastic from your end as, a guy that's maybe not more as familiar as me with these two. What was your overall assessment of the fight and the finish?
It just looked like you had a very technical striker in Chris Curtis versus a guy who just wanted to wing bombs. Like
Right.
Sean Lally just came out the gates like looking for a big KO, and he never really stopped until he got knocked out himself at the end. I think he knew he was down on the scorecards and went for it. I always respect guys for that because it's always weird when you as a fan and the fighter know that they're down 2 rounds and then they're still kind of fighting that safe technical
Right.
Game plan in the third round. It's like if he goes to decision you're gonna lose. Like you might as well go for it.
Right.
And Sean Lally definitely he went for it, man. Got KO on the process, but like you said, I think his stock rose. Chris Curtis looks very, very polished. And like we'll get in the contract situation, but I thought he was UFC ready. And this I think it just speaks to the talent that's out there, and in the Massachusetts area.
Yeah, we're on the come up finally. It's funny, like we just had nobody for so long, and now we had kind of this invasion of some fighters into the UFC. And honestly, before the Contender Series rosters got announced, I kind of felt like we were in a little bit of a lull. We had all these guys that were, B B B level regional fighters, guys that a couple more fights they'd be ready to try to take it to the UFC. And we've seen, a lot of these guys are getting Contender Series opportunities now. So yeah, I expect the scene here to maybe someday compete with California, but unfortunately,
Yeah,
that's in my dreams for right now.
well, at least you guys have better promotions that you could watch out there
That
because
is true. You should start your own promotion. That's what we're
I don't
doing.
know what's going on out here.
Big Phone MMA.
The
You
few
already have it.
promotions, yeah, the few promotions that we have, gangs start fights, and
Jeez, yeah.
Nate Diaz is slapping Clay Guida, or God knows what else is happening. So yeah, I don't know. And there's absolutely nothing down here in San Diego where
Mm.
there's tons of MMA gyms. So it's very odd. Um, but let's get into the main event. It lasted 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Eight seconds. Yeah, that is. And I think, did I hear them say that wasn't even the fastest finish on the show?
I, I don't know. The fastest
Who
one
could be
last
faster
season,
than that?
the fastest one last season, I believe, was Carl Roberson, and I don't think it was that quick.
So
I
this has
think,
to be the fastest one.
yeah, I think what they were referring to, I heard them say something. I think they said if it was in the UFC, it would have been the fourth
Oh,
fastest knockout in UFC history.
yeah, it's 8 seconds. It's
Right.
insane.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know if there's much to talk about here.
Yeah.
Deshaun Boatwright comes out, looks to connect with the head kick, and Menefield either it was hard to tell, either eats it or completely
Right.
avoids it, lands a bomb of a right hand, overhand right, that sits Boatwright down, and then just nasty ground and pound.
Yeah.
Herb Dean steps in and sort of a weird stoppage, another
Yeah.
weird stoppage.
I honestly wasn't a fan of it just because I felt like, Boatwright, that initial exchange where they collided, I felt like Boatwright was really off balance. If you watch the replay, the first punch that Menefield threw kind of more was like a push. It kind of hit him in the chest area, like kind of just knocked him over. Then he clipped him on the way down with a shorter shot. But I thought Boatwright was okay. And then, he hit him with one good one, really square on the face on the ground, and a couple other ones that kind of glanced, hit some arms and stuff. But I would have maybe let it go on for a little bit longer. I do think that Boatwright was intelligently defending himself. He didn't appear to be knocked out. I mean, Herb has a better view of his eyes than we do, stuff like that. But I would have liked to see that go a little bit longer. Not trying to take anything away from Menefield. That was just kind of an odd situation for everyone. 8 seconds. It's happened so quick.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even know. I mean, it's not like Boatwright really did anything wrong here. I think this was his first. Was this his first loss?
This was his first loss. Yeah, he's only 3-0, which is, besides Greg Hardy, I believe that the most inexperienced fighters on the show have been 3-0.
Wow. Okay. So I mean, 3-0. It really doesn't do anything. I mean, he just gets caught with the palm of right hand
Right.
in an awkward position as he's throwing, the head kick. So,
Yeah.
once that right hand connects, he's already off balance, gets sat on his butt because of that. And then a somewhat, you could call it an early stoppage from Herb Dean. So,
Right.
I'm sure we'll see more of Boatwright in the future.
Yeah. His big problem has been getting fights, from my understanding. Like he was off for a year and a half. This was his first fight, and he told me that he'd had like 3 or 4 or 5 fights in between then and now. A bunch of them he'd go to the weigh-in, go to the day of the fights, and the opponent wouldn't have showed up, type of thing. So maybe now that he's got the exposure, LFA or somebody will grab him. Titan isn't too far away down there. Make the drive from Virginia to Florida. I know it's not close necessarily, but it's within his realm of ability. So hopefully, that he gets another opportunity somewhere and can get some fights and get some rhythm in his career.
Yeah, definitely. And so let's get into it. The white decision. Dana White, of course, picks Alonzo Menefield. I mean, that's pretty straightforward there. You get an 8-second knockout, and you just happen to be in the shallowest, division in the UFC. That's going
And
to happen.
it's your second stint on Contender Series. So
And yeah,
yeah,
and
a lot of things working for him.
just to stack things up. And then, as we had kind of mentioned before, Greg Hardy, but with some caveats in the fact that, it sounds like he's on some kind of developmental deal and probably won't be fighting, in the UFC the next time he steps into a cage. But basically, they don't want Greg Hardy going to some other organization.
Yeah.
So they're gonna sign him, and he'll get a fight. Did Dana White make the right decisions?
I think he made 2 right decisions and a third wrong one. Before I get to the wrong one, the other 2 that I'm not talking about in either one of these categories. Well, I guess he made 4 right decisions and 2 wrong ones. The 2 right decisions were to have Kevin Holland and Montel Jackson go back to the regional scene. I think both of them could use another fight. I think Holland has to display that he's, a little bit more able to use his abilities that we all think he has. We can't just assume that he's going to be this great fighter and then have him go out there and do these showboat things. So that's good. Montel Jackson, like I said, benefits him to take another fight on the regional scene or 2. Then we get to Chris Curtis, who I think that was just, I would like to hear from Dana White exactly what made him not want to sign Chris Curtis. We've seen him take 3 fighters in the past, especially where he's taking guys that, he took Greg Hardy, but Greg Hardy's not really on a real contract. Greg Hardy's not going to take a roster spot for a little while, or as far as we know. So for me, like, Chris Curtis went out there. He put on the most well-rounded performance, the most complete performance out of everyone. He displayed, he didn't just go out there and get a quick knockout. He was able to display a lot of different things that he can do. His ability to read an opponent in a fight. I've seen it locally here a lot, where he'll start off slow the first round. I'll be like, wow, he didn't come out there and he wasn't as dominant as I thought he was going to be. And then the second round picks up, third round picks up, and then by the end of the fight, he's just got the dude's timing down to a key. To a T, excuse me. And so for me, man, that was just a little disappointing. Chris announced on Facebook afterwards that he's actually broke his hand in the fight, and he's said he's going to retire. With MMA, sometimes people say things off the spur of the moment, but if that's true, that's a shame, because he's a really talented fighter that should have been in the UFC a long time ago. And it would be a shame to see this type of situation be the way that he goes out.
Yeah, definitely don't want to see that, man. And I would love to play devil's advocate here, but I completely agree with you. I think when the Contender Series moves to ESPN Plus next year, obviously the level of production will go up, and I think you'll definitely be getting. It'll be a lot more streamlined, because the way they did it, or the way they're doing it, is the fights end. Dana White and the matchmakers go into this back room and they run some kind of like promo stuff in the meantime, and then Dana comes back out and like very awkwardly like says who he's picking.
Yeah.
It's not very straightforward. Like you're kind of like, oh, are they getting picked, or what's going on here? I think when it moves to ESPN, it's going to be much more straightforward than that. Much more streamlined, and they'll probably even like interview Dana after, like, why did you make the decisions? Like, let's talk about this and this, and so that'll be the benefit of Contender Series being on ESPN Plus and not the UFC's streaming service. So if you had to give this card, do we call these cards? Are these cards?
Yeah, why not?
All right, well, cards or shows or whatever. How would you rate this?
I would say it was I'd give it probably a B or B plus. I think it was a good episode. Comparing it to the other 8 episodes we've seen, there were some episodes that were better, that were A episodes, but I thought this one was a good one. Most of the last season, I wouldn't say that any episode didn't deliver. So it's got some really tough competition so far of what we've seen. The pool of all the cards that have happened have been, it's a tough competition to pick out the best one. So I'd say a B plus. I was happy with it. There was no bad fight. There was no boring fight. Some weird, wacky stuff to keep us on our toes and some knockouts. So can't complain for a Tuesday, 2 hours, 5 fights. No complaints on my part.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit higher. I'll give it an A minus. I think the highlight reel are the two highlight reels really. Greg Hardy, the UFC couldn't have asked for a better outcome there. We all know what they wanted. A huge Greg Hardy, highlight reel knockout like that goes a long way. And then the 8-second Alonzo Menifield knockout is also up there. 4 finishes out of 5 fights. It's hard to it's hard to get better than that. I might get top later on. We'll see. I'm sure the Contender Series has some great fights in store for us, like it did last year. And I'm sure we'll be looking forward to many more great interviews from you as well. Also, we have the complete guide to the. I know we were getting some questions on Twitter. When is Nick Newell fighting? He's going to be fighting on the July 24th episode, which is in your Contender Series complete guide.
It is. Yeah. We have all 8 weeks there. We have fights listed. The UFC, I believe, on their broadcasts have announced through week 4. Their website is through week 3. So if you're looking for any type of, the rest of the schedule or any background on these guys or anything, timeline of the events that have happened, results for the events that have already happened, just check it out, because I don't think anywhere else you can get this information. It's even got the Brazilian matchups and some of the fighters that are going to be featured on that. So definitely check that out if you guys get a chance on MMA Today. I've worked for a couple months on it. Seems like it's a pretty good guide for those people that are more interested in Contender Series. And we'll keep adding to it as time goes on. James Lynch announced a fight earlier in an interview, so I have to put that on the guide, and we update it daily.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah. And those interviews, always great. Some of these guys, are getting their story told for the first time. I know we had an army veteran.
Yeah. I so far so good. It's pretty interesting because, we know about the fighters that are in the UFC now that we hear an interview about, with them every single card, and they're still super interesting, their careers to follow them. But that initial story, a lot of these guys have crazy backstories. Last season there were everything from, guys being homeless to guys getting weird opportunities working at a fair to, and they get pulled out of the crowd to take a fight, or a guy, in the military and does all this crazy stuff. And, there's just such a wide range of backgrounds and, just backstories that these guys come from. So it's definitely cool to follow along. We've had some good ones so far, and we'll I'll be continuing to interview as many as the guys as, time allows.
All right, good stuff. That was episode 1 of what are we calling this show again? The white decision.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if that catches on.
Yeah.
If not,
a little skeptical, but we'll see what happens.
Well, we got some backups, but you guys have a great night, and thank you so much, Nolan, for being on.
Hey, thanks, man. We'll be talking next week, and I'll talk to all you guys on Twitter. How about that?
Looking forward to it.